Good morning. It is Thursday, the 12th of March. I'm Maeve McMahon, and this is Europe Today, your daily dose of European news and analysis, live here on Euronews. Coming up, in signs the war in Iran is escalating even more, Iran's Revolutionary Guards now say they've struck a Liberia-flagged vessel they claim is Israeli-owned. Iran had promised to only target ships linked to the US or Israel, but another Thai carrier was also struck in the Strait of Hormuz. The Israeli military, meanwhile, says it has identified missiles launched from Iran towards Israel and that air defence systems are working to intercept them. This while thousands continue to flee southern Lebanon, and the International Energy Agency says its member countries could release up to 400 million barrels of oil from their reserves to ease the impact of the war. And French President Emmanuel Macron has said Iran's military capabilities had been weakened but not, quote, reduced to zero by US and Israeli strikes. He made the comments after a meeting with G7 leaders, including President Donald Trump. For more on that G7 meeting, we can head straight to Paris and bring in Euronews' France correspondent, Sofia Katsenkova, who's outside the Elysee Palace for us this morning. Good morning, Sofia. Look, France is pushing here for a coordinated response to the energy shock caused by the war in the Middle East. But what exactly can President Macron do?
Well, speaking after the talk with leaders of the G7, which France currently chairs, French President Emmanuel Macron confirmed that countries had agreed to release 400 million barrels from strategic oil reserves. The move is designed to calm market prices as the conflict threatens shipping through the Strait of Hormuz, one of the world's most critical oil routes, which handles about a fifth of global supply. Macron said that the release would be equivalent to roughly 20 days of oil normally transiting through the Strait of Hormuz. But the French leader also insisted that the current energy shock should not change policy towards Moscow, despite the pressure on global oil markets. Let's take a listen.
The situation is in no way justifying lifting the existing sanctions against Russia, which should continue. The situation should obviously not reduce our attention to Ukraine, our support for Ukraine, and the clarity we have regarding sanctions against Russia.
So these comments come as U.S. President Donald Trump suggested earlier this week that some oil sanctions could potentially be lifted to ease pressure on markets, though he did not specify whether that would apply to Russia. And that's why Macron kept insisting yesterday that the war in the Middle East must not overshadow what's happening in Ukraine, where Russia's full-scale invasion has entered its fifth year. The French president is due to host his Ukrainian counterpart, Volodymyr Zelensky, in Paris tomorrow, where the two leaders are expected to discuss ways to increase pressure on Russia. Back to you, Brussels.
Indeed, and we'll likely come back to you tomorrow for an update on that very important meeting. Sofia Katsenkova, thank you so much for that live broadcast there from Paris. Now back in Brussels, there is major concern over the potential shocks this war could have on the European economy, from high inflation to low growth. The EU Commission is mulling next steps. For more, very shortly we'll be joined here by the European Commissioner for the Economy, Valdis Dombrovskis. But first, let's bring in Euronews' EU editor, Maria Tadeo, for some more context. Maria, good morning. What is at stake here for the European economy?
Good morning. So it's very much the scenario of stagflation that you allude to, one in which obviously growth is impacted and then you see inflation pick up, mostly because of the energy story that is playing out around the Strait of Hormuz, but also the Gulf countries, where they're not just producers of oil, but they're also key in the transportation. Yesterday, we saw this emergency release of strategic reserves of oil to the tune of 400 million barrels. Obviously, the idea is that this is going to ease some of the price pressure. But of course, as long as the war continues, there is a big question mark as to whether you can stabilize a market so volatile with such uncertainty playing out on the ground. And Maeve, to that point, indeed, we are now joined by the Commissioner for the Economy, Valdis Dombrovskis, who joins us here in the studio.
Good morning.
Good morning. Commissioner, just a very simple question. How bad is it going to get for Europe?
The economic impact of current crisis in the Middle East will, to a large extent, will depend on how long the conflict will continue, how wide it will spread. So, in a sense, if we manage to achieve a quick de-escalation, the impact may be limited. If it gets protracted and correspondingly both with disruptions for oil shipping and oil and gas production, that's indeed, as you mentioned, can create a stagflationary shock for the European economy, where due to the elevated energy prices, it peaks in a broader inflation and also negatively affects growth through confidence effects, through disruptions in supply chains, and through tighter financing conditions.
So then what are you going to do as a commission? Because we see the capital saying the European industry cannot deal with another energy shock. We need measures. And the commission is going back to the member states saying cut taxes on things like electricity. So what's going to happen in the short term, in specific terms?
Well, in a short term, as you already mentioned, it's a question of releasing the oil reserves which we have, which can add substantial volumes to the market and which are meant exactly for situations like this, where we are facing disruptions.
But the market did not take that as a positive. Oil prices still went up.
Well, there we must see what are the reasons for this. First, we see that oil prices are very volatile. Second, Iran was hitting a major oil storage in Oman. It basically continues to target energy infrastructure in neighboring countries. So this volatility is certainly linked with this, and those oil reserves volumes have not reached the market yet.
And do you believe, and you've dealt with the U.S. administration many years now, do they have a plan? Because I'm confused. Is this a war or just an excursion? I listen to President Trump. I hear 20 different things a day.
I cannot tell this on behalf of U.S. administration.
But what's your impression?
You know, also, there were no prior consultations with the EU before taking those steps. But what's important right now is to work towards quick de-escalation of the conflict. And from the EU side, we are also engaged with the countries of the region aiming for that.
And let's talk about Ukraine, because obviously you are very supportive of Ukraine. I think everyone knows this by now. There's a loan of 90 billion euros that is blocked by Hungary. There is no indication that the president or the prime minister of Hungary is going to budge. And at the time in December, we were told that if Ukraine didn't get the money by April, they would collapse. April's just around the corner. So what's going to happen?
First of all, in between, we have finalized legislative work on a number of things, of Ukraine support their own regulation. We are also amendments to Ukraine facility. We are working with Ukrainian authorities on all the documents which are necessary, like memorandum of understanding, financing, strategy, and so on. The
man is Orban, but it comes down to Orban. How do you deal with Orban?
No, but so basically the missing element is amendments to the multi-annual financial framework, which would allow the Commission actually to go to the market and borrow. And this indeed we need by April, and we continue this strong engagement. There was commitment from all 27 member states to do those amendments to our multi-annual financial framework.
But do you have to wait until the Hungarian election? Is this now ultimately the elephant in the room, whether he gets elected or not?
Well, it has been said before that we will ensure the support one way or another.
With or without Hungary?
We expect, obviously, Hungary to honor its commitments, which also Prime Minister Orban took in December last year. And it's worth reminding that Hungary is not even paying for that support.
Okay, well, Commissioner, thank you very much, of course, for joining us on Euronews this morning.
Thank you so much. Now, thank you so much as well, Maria, today for that. Now, moving on, as global instability continues, the Strait of Hormuz, of course, has become in the eye of the storm. But it's actually not the first time it's in the eye of the geopolitical storm, as Ari Yakupianis reports.
The narrow Strait of Hormuz, despite being a waterway, is starting to become a literal geopolitical landmine. A fifth of the world's oil flows here. For Washington, any disruption means higher petrol prices and food inflation. A nightmare for the upcoming midterms. And for Iran, the waterway is their ultimate leverage. Tehran has vowed not to allow even a single liter of oil reach its enemies. And in response, the US says it has destroyed 16 Iranian mine-laying vessels. But hey, we've been here already, so who's up for a history lesson? Mines are the poor man's weapon of naval warfare. They are dangerously cheap, and basic contact mines can cost as little as a few $1,000s. Yet they can disable a billion-dollar warship or a supertanker just in seconds. And during the 1980s Iran-Iraq war, specifically the tanker war, Iran filled the same waters with mines to halt Iraqi exports. And in 1988, after a US frigate was nearly sunk by an Iranian mine, the Ronald Reagan administration responded firmly, launching Operation Praying Mantis. Historians say that in a single day, the US Navy dealt a devastating blow to Iranian's operational fleet. The message was clear: mess with the oil and you will lose your navy. Because of disruptions in the Strait, Iraq, which relies on oil for 90% of its revenue, is now desperately exploring alternative routes through Syria, Jordan and Turkey. And for Europe, this crisis proves that swapping Russian oil for Gulf crude meant simply trading one dependency for another. So maybe it would signal a revival of decentralized green energy. After all, if the climate argument becomes too polarizing, it could be now about military and energy sovereignty.
Jakub Janis reporting for us there. And as global instability continues to worsen, particularly in Iran and the rest of the Gulf, NATO has been carrying out military exercises in the High North and in Norway. Known as Cold Response, it involves 14 NATO countries. And for more, Euronews correspondent Shona Murray joins us now from Norway.
Well, good morning, Maeve. We're here in the Arctic covering NATO's Cold Response military exercise, which is part of the Arctic Sentry military exercise, which was agreed amongst allies back in January to deal with the political chaos that ensued at NATO when Donald Trump said he wanted to take over Greenland. We're stationed at a Norwegian coastal corvette, which is the fastest military vessel in the world. And all around us, we have military personnel who are taking part in this exercise. There's around 25,000 soldiers from the United States, from all across NATO alliance. But what we heard in the last few days is at least one squadron of US Marine F-35s have been redirected from this exercise to the Middle East to deal with the conflict that is ongoing there. Now, NATO is not a party to that conflict, but in the last week, Turkey has had to intercept 2 ballistic missiles coming from Iran. So there are concerns in NATO that NATO could get dragged into the situation. In response, NATO has delivered Patriot defence systems to the southern part of Turkey and also has heightened its defence posture, saying that they will defend the whole of the territory. But I caught up with a commander from the Norwegian Air Force and I asked him about NATO's readiness and capabilities, both in the theatre of the Arctic and in the Middle East.
Well, we need to be prepared for war. So every day we are making sure that we are taking the right decisions. So this base will be prepared for war. And one thing is, if the war comes, we will fight it. The other thing is, if we are prepared enough, we want Putin to wake up in the morning and say that maybe NATO is too prepared for a war today, so we need to postpone that.
We've seen in the past week ballistic missiles entering its Turkish airspace. I mean, how do you think that situation can escalate in relation to NATO?
Well, I don't think I want to go into details about the world situation, but I can say that if Article 5 is in effect, then Norway is also in war, even though the attack is somewhere else.
Shona Murray reporting for us there. Now moving on, in other news, Ukraine is seeking support from the European Union to get their money and valuables back from the Hungarian government. Last week, Prime Minister Viktor Orban seized cash and gold from a Ukrainian bank amid an ongoing tax authority investigation. Euronews' Ukraine correspondent Sasha Vakalina is across this serious spat between Kyiv and Budapest and joins me now here on set. Sasha, so we understand the staff have been released, but what about the valuables?
Indeed, the staff have been released after 28 hours being detained in Hungary and being interrogated in Hungary. But the valuables, the gold and the money and the shipment in total worth something like $82 million remains in Hungary. And it's been exactly 1 week since now. This shipment was going from Austria to Ukraine by Hungary by road. The reason it was going by road is because, of course, the airspace in Ukraine remains closed for over 4 years since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. And Ukraine's state-owned Oshchad Bank and also the National Bank of Ukraine are now trying to bring back that shipment of the cash and the gold back to Ukraine, Maeve.
OK, Sasha Vakalina, thank you so much for that. And actually, for the view from Ukraine, we can now cross over to Kiev and speak to Sergei Nikolaichuk, first Deputy Governor from the National Bank of Ukraine. Good morning, Sergei. Thank you so much for joining us here on Europe Today on Euronews. So we understand the Commission has received your official letter. Have you gotten a response yet?
Our European partners to ensure that this incident does not remain without an appropriate response. Our requests were addressed to the EU High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, the leadership of European Commission Directorate General for FISMA, European Central Bank, Austrian National Bank, and at this stage we are still awaiting for formal replies from our counterparts.
And what kind of support does Kiev want and expect from Brussels here?
Well, we expect an impartial and transparent review of this case with clear conclusions that would demonstrate in practice that European Union's commitment to the rule of law. It is important that the European Commission and other relevant EU institutions have full access to all necessary information and documentation in order to provide their own independent assessment of the actions taken by the Hungarian side. From our side, we stand ready to provide any information required to cooperate fully with the European partners.
And tell us about the direct contact between Kiev and Budapest. How's that going here?
Communication with the Hungarian side is being handled by our Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which is leading the efforts to resolve the situation through diplomatic channels. Also, Oshchad Bank, together with its legal advisors, is working to clarify all circumstances of the case and remains in contact with the Hungarian authorities with the aim of resolving the issue of the cargo and as well as ensuring the protection of the rights and interests of the financial institutions and its employees. From the NBU side, we facilitate all these efforts.
And just on that point of clarification, how routine is this kind of cash and property transport through other countries?
Well, that is the regular and common practice to transport cash from Austrian Raiffeisen Bank to Ukraine by Oshchad Bank and many other countries. Actually, yeah, so we reviewed and we may confirm that the cargo has been properly documented. We see no irregularities in the practice of international transportation of cash between banks. And actually, it is also important to note that Raiffeisen Bank International, which is one of the main suppliers of FX cash to Ukrainian banks, confirmed in its statement that it had provided the relevant authorities with all required documentation related to these cash management operations.
So how would you describe the whole case? Do you consider it a confiscation?
Well, from our point of view, the actions taken by the Hungarian authorities raise serious concerns and suggest that this case goes beyond purely procedural or security-related issues. From the very beginning, the sequence of events has indicated that the situation has a political dimension rather than being a standard legal or regulatory matter. The facts speak for themselves.
OK, Sergei Nikolaichuk, thank you so much for joining us here this morning on Europe Today on Euronews. For more, of course, on that story and on that ongoing investigation, do take a look at Sasha Vakalina's reporting. And, of course, Chandra Ziros, our Hungarian reporter, his reporting as well on Euronews.com. But that does bring this edition of Europe Today to an end. Thank you so much for your company, as always. We'll be back, of course, tomorrow, Friday, bright and early here on Euronews with a fresh edition of Europe Today. Don't miss it.